We look back in history and we see there's always been a class of people. There's always been a ruling elite that have tried to say that they're better than us, that they have more understanding than us, more knowledgeable than us, and that they should rule over us and control us. This power, this operation has been going on in mankind for thousands of years. And here we are in 2023, and it's still in operation. They're using laws and statutory powers to keep us in bondage, to keep us under subjection to their rule and to their authority. We look back, we go back to the Roman Empire. We can go back to the Egyptian Empire. Or what about the Babylonian Empire? You want to get more modern than that? What about the Chinese dynasties? Or Alexander the Great? What about Joseph Stalin and what he did? And the many, many people that he murdered and killed because he believed that he was superior, because he believed that he had that right. And that's what it really comes down to, right? A right. They believe they have the right. When you look at the monarch, and you saw my other video, divine right of kings. So they believe they're exercising a right. And what's that right? Well, they're to rule over us. They're to control us. These type of people, these individuals, are so sick in their mind, that they'll kill other human beings, that they'll kill massive amounts of human beings in order to have power, in order to control, in order to rule over people. Again, look at Alexander the Great, right? And look at all these communist leaders and all these historical people in the past, like Genghis Khan and Mao, and again, Joseph Stalin. There's so many of them, right? That were under that power, that was under that control, that thinking, that they're better than the rest, that they have the right to control the rest. Well, they're still doing it today. Look at the police force. Look at all the government agents. Look at all the representatives of the governments that they have to try and enforce their laws, their statutes, their regulations against you, to try and get you to submit and surrender to their power, to their elitist power, to their controlling power. And many of us, right, we just accept it. And many of us just live under that tyranny and live under that control mechanism. Why? Because we don't know any better. And we don't understand what's going on. But in our heart of hearts, right, and deep down inside of us, we know something's wrong. We know this isn't right. And if you sit with someone and you talk with them, eventually it'll come up, right? Something that bothers them about the government. Something that bothers them about, why does the government have the right to control me? Why do they have power over me? They feel it and they'll express it, but they don't understand why. And it's been like that again for generations and generations when the king was there and the king gave his edicts and the people had to submit at the risk of death, at the risk of being killed because he was the authority. Well, now they don't kill you, right? They fine you, or they take away your property, or they make your life a living hell because you don't want to listen and you don't want to submit. Well, we know what's better for you, and we're going to tell you how to behave, and we're going to tell you what to do and what you can't do, and we're going to tell you where you can and can't go, and we're going to tell you if you want to do this and you want to do that, well, you got to get our permission first. Well, who are you? Who are you to tell me this? And who are you to say this to me? I wasn't born with you attached to me. I wasn't born with a book of instructions that said I'm under accountability to listen to you. But you want to use your laws, and you want to use your authority, and you want to use your fear to try and get me to submit. You know, I have beautiful dogs. I have 3 beautiful German Shepherds, and never would I not feed them. And never would I kick them out in the winter time, in the snow time, or in the summertime and say, get outside and stay outside. You have no more house now. You have nowhere to live anymore. But this government, right? And these governments across our lands, they create statutory powers, right? That put people on the street. They create statutory powers that cause people to live in poverty and cause people to live in destitute. You see, that's the real face of these rulers. That's the real heart of these rulers. When you look to the statutory law and you look to how they rule and restrict individuals in their territory, and you look at how the laws are used to punish people and fine people and inflict hardship upon people, then you see the true face of the ruler. Then you see the true face of that power. And again, why do we put up with it? And again, why do we accept it? Well, because the majority of us lack knowledge, lack understanding, and lack the wisdom. You've seen what they've done in the law, how hard, how difficult they've made it for someone to exercise their natural rights, for someone to stand before this ruling authority, this elitist power, and to claim, take your shackles off of me, give me the key, and unlock my chains, and let me go. Who are you to direct me? Who are you to control me? Well, I strongly believe, and I strongly put forth, that within the laws that exist, within the laws that are out there, there is a pathway to freedom. There is a road that leads us to allow us to operate our natural rights, and thereby breaking the tyranny and breaking the control that the government has placed over us as individuals. But the problem is, and the situation is, that it's very difficult to find and very difficult to operate. You see, you gotta know domestic law, and you gotta see where they limit and abridge you, and then you gotta know that you have natural rights, and you gotta see where they operate in law, and then you gotta learn about the court system, and then you gotta learn about the administration of justice and the original jurisdiction of the court in order to go before them. So they make it really, really hard for any one individual to exercise their freedom. They don't make it impossible, but they make it very, very hard. Why? Because they want to keep us under their control. They want to keep us subjected to them, that when they come by and throw you a fine, or when they come by and tax you and put penalties on you and try and take your property, whatever it may be, that there's no recourse for you. There's nothing you can do. That you got to bow down your knee, and you got to submit to that authority, and you got to submit to that tyranny. But you don't have to, right? If you understand the law, you don't have to. There is a way for a man to be free. There's a way for a man to shake off that bondage and that burden that they're putting upon your life. But it takes wisdom, takes knowledge, takes understanding, takes studying. It's not just something you can get for free. I wish it was easier than that. I wish I could just give you a key or put out one little video and say, yo, go to court and say this, blah, 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 and oh, you're going to control the court, everything's going to go great your way. No, that's not how it works, right? You can't even dream about going to court first unless what? Unless you understand the limitation and abridgment that's been placed upon you. Unless you understand that when they came at you with a statutory power, with a rule and regulation, that rule and regulation was limiting and abridging your natural right. And because they limited and abridged your natural right, now they're failing to fulfill their duty, because they have the duty in law to recognize us in our full legal capacity, and they have the duty in law to recognize our natural rights when we invoke them, but they don't. And they limit and they abridge our rights, and then it's our responsibility now to stand up and say, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, well, what do? Now I got to go to court. Well, just walk into court and just tell the judge, oh, I'm a man, I have rights, and the government, I don't recognize the government, I'm free, and I don't care about the law, and I don't care about what you say, and I'm going to do what I want to do. They're going to throw you in jail. They're going to throw you in jail for years, and you're not going to get out. If you go before the court, right, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know that you're seeking the administration of justice. You got to know that you're not going into a statutory court, but you're going into a court of original jurisdiction that recognizes natural rights, human rights, fundamental rights. And you want to bring that before the court and say, listen, these jokers created statutory laws and regulations, and they're limiting and they're abridging my natural rights, and they have the obligation not to do so. And you, judge, you've been put under the presumption that their statutory powers, their statutory laws conform to my natural rights or respect my natural rights, but they don't. And I'm here to tell you they don't, and I'm here to show you they don't. Why do they have the right to make me a servitude? Why do they have a right to place me under servitude to them? Why do they have the right to control me? Who are they to say that they can control me? And you want to draw the court crazy, and I don't recommend you do this, but you want to draw the court crazy, walk them backwards. Walk them backwards from where you're standing, right? And make the court admit where does this authority come from? This authority that the crown is exercising, where do they claim to have it? And they're going to have to go and say, well, they got it from God. What do you mean they got it from God? Is this schizophrenic court? Is this a schizophrenic court? You can't accept that claim. If I walk you back, judge, and any judge in Canada that's hearing this, oh boy, if I walk you backwards, if I never before you, and I'm going to come again, and I'm going to come with this before you. And I walk you backwards, right? To who the crown is and where that crown comes from. Are you going to stand before the court? Are you going to stand before the people and say, I accept the power of the crown from where it comes from? That they had an imaginary meeting with God and that God claimed and told them that they have the right to rule over mankind? Well, let me tell you something. I had an imaginary meeting with God this night too. And he told me that now I have the right to rule over people. And it's no longer the crown. Okay? So now you got two crazy conflicting claims. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. Those who are hearing my video, I am not joking. I've shown you where they believe the crown got their power from. Where the crown exercises their power from. So if you walk a court backwards to the commencement of that power, you are going to bind that court up. But that's not what you're there to do, right? You're there what? To show them that they limited and abridged your natural rights. To show them that they limited and abridged your natural right, which they have the duty to respect and honor, according to their own treaties that they signed, according to their own human rights instruments that they signed. It's not for nothing when you look at my last video that I put out there, right? When it talked about when the crown's responsible for actions that they've done, they say for a duty they omitted to perform. And if you know what omitted means, it's from the word omission. And what does that mean? I was unaware that I had to do it. I was unaware that this existed. I was unaware that this operated. And most of the crown agents, right? And most of the crown servants, right? Well, they're really committing actions of omission, right? Because if they knew their rights and freedoms, they wouldn't be sitting where they're sitting. Most of them. But the ministers and the privy council and the higher courts, the judges of the courts, they know what's going on. And when they're confronted, right, with a limitation and abridgment of a natural right, of a fundamental human right, well, the crown has committed an act of omission. The crown has failed in their duty to respect and ensure my fundamental right, which was their obligation. The only thing the crown was hoping is that I would never catch them. I would never be aware of it. And I live my life and go to the grave as their subject and servant. If I have an enemy that's confronting me, right? And they come with a sword and a shield, and I stand in front of them and I say to them, well, I don't recognize your sword and shield, buddy. You see that sword you're holding that's sharp and can cut my arms off, and that shield that can deflect my attacks? Well, I don't recognize you have them. So the fact that I don't recognize that you have them, you can't do anything to me. You can't do nothing to me. And then he swings the sword, right? And chops off my head. And chops off my head. Oh, but I didn't recognize it could do anything to me. And that's what equates to some of the stances that the people out there are taking. When they're coming out and they're saying, oh, well, that's statutory law and that's legislation, and I don't have to know about legislation and I don't have to know about statutory law. That's their weapons that they're using against you. That's the weapons that they're using against you. And you're equating it to saying, well, I don't have to worry about the weapons they have. And when they swing that weapon, what do? They throw you in jail. And when they swing that weapon, what do? They take your property away. And when they swing that weapon, what do? They give you a fine. And then you just sit back and say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about the weapon. Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. If you're going to fight your enemy, you're going to have to worry about that weapon. Why? Because knowing about that weapon and being aware of that weapon is where you find the limitation and abridgment that they placed upon your life. When you go into the enactment and you see an article of law, right? And that article of law is written and it limits and it abridges your natural human right. Well, that's where you've got them. That's where you begin to take hold of the situation, because you realize and you see, well, this law that they put into operation that they're trying to apply against me or to me, it's limiting and abridging my natural rights. And they're not supposed to do that. They're not supposed to do that. And now I caught them doing it through the law. So if you don't know the weapons that they're using against you, when they throw those weapons towards you, all they're going to do is defeat you. We're living under one mass system of slavery. All of us. And many people are claiming to have the key out of this slavery. But you know what the law says? The law says you have the key in your pocket. The law says that it's been set up, that you have the right not to be deprived of your natural rights and freedoms. And if you don't understand what I just said, then If you don't understand, that's okay. That's okay. But you have the responsibility. And the law has given you the power. The Office of the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General of Canada, right? They have the responsibility, according to the statutory power enactment, that they're supposed to verify all these statutory powers and make sure that they're not limiting and abridging your natural right, your fundamental right, which is never to be limited or abridged, right? The very definition of a natural right and an absolute right means it's never to be limited or abridged. And that was their responsibility. And so these guys, right, these authorities, right, they allowed the Municipal Act to come into operation. And they allowed that article of law where it says that the inhabitants of the municipalities are incorporated into the corporation, become an agent of the corporation. So that's a limitation and abridgment, right? They forced you to be incorporated into their corporate body. That comes against your natural right. So all the responsibilities and all the duties that are associated with that incorporation, you want to be free from. That's what I'm seeking, to be free from. Because that's what transpired, right? When I became incorporated into that corporation, well, I took up the duties and responsibilities that are associated with that incorporation. Now, the act of that incorporation was against my fundamental right. And when I begin to understand that, and I begin to become aware of that, then I know when I'm going to go before the court and what I'm going to bring and what my argument is. Now, that Attorney General's office, right, it represents the Queen. It represents the Queen. So when you go to court, you're going to face that office. And that's that same office that had the obligation to make sure that the statutory power that you're complaining about right now didn't abridge and limit your right. So the fact that they failed in their duty and their responsibility, and now you have them before the court, and now you bring them before the court. You know what you're saying? You're saying the rule of law has been broken. You're saying something unfair has transpired within the world of law. Well, what's that, sir? What are you talking about? Well, my natural right was limited and abridged. I was incorporated into a corporation without my knowledge and without my consent. And I was made to take up and to fulfill responsibilities and duties that I never agreed to. At this point is where consent matters. At this point is where your choice and your will matters. Because the question of law becomes, did you give over your right? Did you give over your will? Or were you made to play a statutory creature? Did law force you into some capacity, and being forced into that capacity, did it limit and abridge your natural right? That's what the law is looking to see. That's what we got to show. So you're showing that by being incorporated into the municipality, by being incorporated into the corporation, then being controlled by the executive powers, all those actions limited and abridged my natural rights. And the Attorney General's office allowed that operation of law to come into existence when they had the obligation to make sure that there wouldn't be an operation of law that did such a work to me, that produced such a fruit against me.